Oh goodness, is this thing on? Oh, it is. Sorry guys, I'm using a different camera than I've normally used for the UFC predictions. It's actually been a while since I've done a UFC prediction, now that you mention it. To kind of give you a heads up, I've been really busy as of late, and this is really the first UFC show of the fight that I actually care about watching to pop up in quite a while. And boy, life is really interesting. Who would have thought that a year ago we would be watching Mark Hunt? Yes, that Mark Hunt battling for the UFC Heavyweight Championship of the world. Granted, granted, it is the interim heavyweight championship, but still, it is an amazing reversal of fortune for this guy's career. You know, he's a pride export. His career was dead in the water. He comes to UFC, loses a lot of fights, and then he starts winning. And he has these really entertaining fights, and it's just crazy that, yeah, we're here. We're living in the era of Mark Hunt, Super Samoan UFC champion. But of course, that's not guaranteed because he has a match against Fabricio Werdum. And Fabricio Werdum, he's a really talented fighter, but I don't think anybody wants him to be champion because he doesn't really have that knockout finesse that you want out of your typical UFC heavyweight contender. He's a very skillful grappler, obviously. First got to submit Fedor. He looked outstanding in that matchup against Travis Brown, where basically he did the exact opposite of what we thought he was going to do and actually stood with him and looked really good and looked great against the defense. And Brown is dude knocking people out. Let's give Mr. Verdum some credit. He weathered that storm and he really made Travis Brown look bad. Not to say that Verdum's had a lot of great matches over the years. Obviously, you had that a match against Alistair Overeem, where he still lost to an Overeem who was gassed after like the first 2 minutes of fighting. And of course, there's that Junior Dos Santos matchup. The less about that, the better. So with Cain Velasquez tearing his meniscus, that left things open for Mark Hunt to come in, coming off that victory over Roy Nelson. It was a dude who's really hard to knock out. That's pretty impressive. So we have Mark Hunt show up, and he's challenging on short notice for Fabricio Werdum, Mexico City. I'll be honest with you, I'm very biased. I want Mark Hunt to win this fight. If he wins, it would be like a miniature Randy Couture defeating Tim Sylvia. Everybody's going to be rooting for Mark Hunt. Well, anybody that's a real, MMA fan from the Pride days will be rooting for Hunt. Even if you're a K1 guy, obviously he's got a history there. It's just such a great, amazing story, and you want to see this guy win. And it really opens the gates. I think having Mark Hunt as even an interim champion makes things a lot more interesting than having Fabricio Werdum as your go-to guy. So I want Hunt to win, but when you look at the actual numerical data, is it still even remotely feasible to think that Mr. Hunt can win this fight? So let's look at the data here and measure them on certain criteria. Now, obviously, a big thing going on here is that Fabricio Werdum has both the height and also the reach advantage, which is obviously big. It's going to be able to kind of keep Mark Hunt at bay. So that kind of tells you the sort of the story of the fight already, and that is that Mr. Hunt is going to have to go in there and really get in close. He's going to get in close quarters combat. Werdum, I think, is going to be doing exactly the same thing he did against Travis Brown, where he uses his range to kind of keep him at a distance. And I think from there, I think Werdum probably going to try to go for the setup. He's going to try to go for the takedowns. He's going to fluster Hunt. Obviously, Hunt doesn't have the world's greatest cardio. So I think, obviously, he's not going to try to do the same thing he did against Travis Brown, where he just kind of keeps him standing and exhausts him. He's going to try to take him down, and he's going to try to go to submission. He's probably going to try to go for it early. Obviously, that's Werdum's strategy. Hunt's strategy, of course, is Mark Hunt's strategy. Go in there and knock the dude out as soon as possible. As far as striking offense goes, what kind of surprised me here, these guys are actually pretty even. It's kind of hard to make a push call on this one. Hunt is, of course, he lands more strikes per minute compared to Werdum, but Werdum is slightly more accurate with his significant strikes. Therefore, I really can't say that one is better than the other, although I think we can all agree that Mark Hunt is the more powerful striker. He's the one with the more explosive knockout abilities. So that could be a variable, but just looking at overall striking ability, you really can't pick one or the other. Striking defense, though, Hunt, he's going to hit 2.45 times a minute compared to Werdum, who's only getting hit about 1.92, so obviously Werdum is the more skillful defender against striking. So defensively, I think the fight kind of leans towards Werdum. Takedown defense, once again, this is actually kind of surprising. We can all agree that Werdum is the better grappler. Mark Hunt, not a great grappler, great striker, not a great wrestler. Werdum, not the world's best wrestler, but for a heavyweight, especially Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy, he's pretty good. Then so you look at the data and you realize that Hunt is actually more accurate with his takedowns than Werdum is. Of course, Werdum lands more takedowns per fight, but still it's a pretty low ratio overall. So with that in mind, it's the thing where we all know, who's got the grappling ability, who has the knockout ability, but it's looking at the mathematical proofs in front of us. It's really hard to kind of say one of these guys is better than the other. So I'm going to say for takedown defense, that's also going to be a push, regrettably. As far as the takedown, this actually favors Hunt by a considerable margin. He actually stuffs 72% of the takedowns against him, whereas Werdum only stuffs 37%, which kind of makes you think, will Hunt kind of go in there and try to go for the takedown? Will he try to do something that historically he's never really been able to do, and that's make this a ground fight? I mean, it could be effective. Maybe the ground and pound would be enough to get Hunt the advantage. Submissions, obviously this one's going to Werdum. It's not even close. He's landing about 1.4 submission attempts per fight, whereas Hunt has basically none, 0.3 per 15 minutes. So there you go. It's a very mixed bag. It's a harder fight to call than I thought. Like I said, I really, really want Hunt to win this one. I want him to go in there. I want him to land that looping knockout and become the interim champion. It'll be a great moment for everybody. But just using my MMA smarts, the MMA math in front of me, I think this fight favors Werdum. Werdum, he's a more skillful defensive fighter. I think this guy can go toe-to-toe with Travis Brown and Alistair Overeem and Fedor Emelianenko, who I think are all better strikers overall compared to Mark Hunt. Then I think Fabricio Werdum will be able to win this in a very, perhaps not that exciting defensive battle. Hunt's going to try to go for the knockout. He's going to get in the first. And from there, Werdum's got to keep him at bay, maybe set the takedowns. And I actually see Werdum winning this one very, very, very late in the fourth. I see him winning by submission. So I want Hunt to win, but if you're making me put my kids' college tuition fund on the line, I'm going to go with Werdum. On the undercard, I don't really care about most of the fights. We're going to do two in depth. And that's the Jake Ellenberger Kelvin Gastelum fight. Very interesting middleweight showdown. Jake Ellenberger, obviously one of the highly touted welterweights for a while, and he's really kind of fallen off a cliff against Kelvin Gastelum. In this fight, Ellenberger, he has the reach advantage, but Gastelum, he's more. I think he's a better striker. He's more accurate, landing more strikes per minute, 3.61 compared to Ellenberger's 2.44. Even though I think it is kind of a push on the striking defense, you really can't say one guy is significantly better than the other. Ellenberger has better takedown offense compared to Kelvin Gastelum, but I think obviously that Ellenberger also has the better takedown defense. He's 93% against 60, and he's marginally better with submissions. So look at this. The takedown game is tilted quite heavily towards Ellenberger. The reach advantage goes towards Ellenberger. Submission go towards Ellenberger. But you got to wonder in the striking game. Does Ellenberger still have that knockout punch in him? Can he keep the range? Can he prevent Kelvin Gastelum from closing the gaps? And I think he does. It's kind of an upset. I know Gastelum, he's one of the guys on the upswing. Ellenberger appears to be on the downswing. But I think he's going to go in there and win this one to snap up a fairly boring unanimous decision. Then we got Ricardo Lamas taking on Dennis Bermudez. Lamas has the reach advantage. He has the striking defense advantage, but in every other category, I'm going with Dennis Bermudez. Better striking offense, better takedown offense, a better takedown defense as well. He actually stuffed 92% of the takedowns against him in his UFC career, which is amazing. He's also better at submissions, 1.8 per fight towards 1.2 per fight against Lamas. Lamas, obviously, he's got punching power, but so does Bermudez, and I think Bermudez better all. Overall, he's the better fighter. He's got the better takedown, marginally better striking as far as not going for the knockout, but just generally using it technically. Got the better jabs. I'm going to go with Bermudez third round stoppage. And of course, there's a whole bunch of other fights on the lineup, but nobody really cares about those. So just to recap, the big three fights, I'm going with Bermudez, round 3 submission. I'm going with Jake Ellenberger, round 3, well not round 3, just unanimous decision victory. And bet your life savings on it. I've got Werdum defeating Hunt, 4th round submission. Those are my very small, brief picks for UFC 180. And you know what? After a bunch of really lackluster shows, we got some cards that actually look pretty decent coming up. So I'll be doing more of these videos. Well, as long as Dana gives me a reason to do them.